President Ibrahim Traoré stood silently before the towering, gold-framed mirror in his private quarters, but the man who stared back was no longer the head of state. Gone were the tailored navy suits, the polished military boots, the carefully groomed public image that dominated newspapers and television screens. Instead, standing there was a man stripped to his essence, dressed in a plain white cotton shirt, slightly wrinkled from restless thought, worn brown trousers with faded seams, and a weathered cap pulled low over his brow, hiding eyes that had seen too much and yet not enough. "Perfect," he murmured to himself with a trace of irony. "No one will recognize the president of Burkina Faso like this." His voice barely reached the warm silence of the room, but from the doorway, a presence stirred. His wife, graceful even in her stillness, watched him with the quiet sorrow of a woman who had loved a soldier, married a revolutionary, and now shared her nights with a man carrying the unbearable weight of a nation. "You don't have to do this," she said softly, her voice trembling just enough to betray how many nights she had lain awake, worrying, praying. Ibrahim turned slowly, and there it was, that same smile. The gentle, almost boyish smile that had once comforted her during power outages and curfews. The one that said, "I see you," even when the world didn't. "I have to," he replied in a calm tone that masked a storm beneath. "How can I lead a people I no longer walk among? My ministers bring me graphs and balance sheets, but my heart tells me something is wrong. And no spreadsheet can measure suffering." She walked toward him, fixing the collar of his shirt as if preparing a child for his first day of school. Her fingers paused on the fabric, lingered there a moment, not wanting to let go. "Be careful," she whispered. "You're a good man, Ibrahim. But good men in power, they don't just attract enemies, they expose them." He pressed a kiss to her forehead, closing his eyes, breathing in the scent of home, not perfume, not protocol, but her. "I'll be back before sunset," he said, though both of them knew that sunset was never promised to men who challenged silence. Moments later, he slipped out of the palace through a seldom-used servants' gate, accompanied only by 2 guards dressed like ordinary laborers. No earpieces. No sunglasses. No motorcade slicing through traffic. Just 3 figures walking into the chaos of the capital, a city that pulsed with stories far louder than press releases. Ouagadougou was alive in a way the palace never could be. Market vendors shouting prices above the blare of car horns, children dodging motorcycles with school bags flapping like wings, the scent of grilled meat and mangoes tangling with the dust in the air. This was the soul of Burkina Faso, unfiltered, unpolished, unrelenting. As he weaved through the crowds, Ibrahim began to listen. Not as a politician, as a son of this soil. He heard women complaining about food prices that made every dinner a gamble between hunger and shame. He heard a group of young men joking, but under the jokes, there was desperation, talk of crossing deserts, risking Libya, even drowning for the chance at a different life. He passed an old man with faded prayer beads, muttering quietly, "The face in the palace is different now, but is the heart?" And then came the voices that hurt the most, the ones that hoped. "At least this Traoré fights the foreigners," someone said over a cup of sweet tea. The last ones only smiled while they signed everything away. Ibrahim paused beside a fruit stall. The mangoes were warm from the sun, and he counted his coins slowly, deliberately, not because he had to, but because he wanted to feel what 20 francs meant. The vendor didn't even glance twice at him. Beside her, a man cursed as he pushed a wheelbarrow full of onions across broken ground. The wheel stuck in a hole, tilted, nearly tipped, and the man laughed in frustration. Ibrahim watched silently. The weight of onions. The pothole. The heat. Such small things. And yet, they were everything. Every cracked road. Every unaffordable fruit. Every stolen dream was a policy failure dressed up in language. This wasn't just a walk. It was a reckoning. But clearly, the work had only just begun. As President Ibrahim Traoré moved deeper into the crowded heartbeat of Ouagadougou, he began to feel the yawning gap between what government reports claimed and what his people actually lived through. And just as that realization settled heavily on his shoulders, a voice pierced through the market's clamor like a siren. Breaking news. Danger in the palace. Traitors are planning to kill President Traoré tonight. The words hung in the air like gunpowder. Ibrahim froze mid-step, his blood chilling instantly. The voice came from a young boy, no older than 12, standing atop an overturned metal crate, his makeshift stage. Dressed in torn shorts and a faded grimy t-shirt, he held up a battered homemade broadcast setup, a radio attached to a stick, duct-taped wires dangling, yet somehow the speaker crackled loud and clear. "Enemies inside the government," the boy announced again, his voice unwavering and strangely authoritative. "They plan to strike during a secret meeting tonight. I repeat, there is a plot to kill the president." Around him, the market reacted with a mix of amusement and disbelief. Some tossed a few coins into his plastic cup. Others laughed, shaking their heads, dismissing it as an overdramatic performance. Another hungry child pretending to be a journalist, selling fiction for food. But Ibrahim wasn't laughing. Something about the boy's eyes, clear, bright, and deadly serious, sent a warning straight to his soul. There was no show here. There was truth wrapped in urgency. Disguised as just another curious onlooker, Ibrahim pushed through the crowd until he stood just a few feet from the boy. "Hey," he whispered, "where did you hear that?" The boy looked at him with sharp suspicion. "Who wants to know?" Ibrahim forced a calm smile. I like news. Never heard anything like that before. Is it a joke?" But the boy dropped from his crate, his demeanor shifting instantly. "It's not a joke, uncle," he said firmly. "I heard it last night. On my shortwave radio. They were speaking in half-code, but I understood enough. They said, 'Tonight is the night.' And they mentioned the president by name, many times." Glancing nervously around, the boy leaned in closer, eyes wide but focused. "I recorded it. Do you want to hear?" Ibrahim's heart pounded. Hands suddenly cold. He nodded. The boy pulled out an old tape recorder, dusty, scratched, barely holding together, and hit play. Static. Then muffled voices emerged. "He must be gone before morning. Tonight, when he meets the council, we have people inside. The guards will be ours." Ibrahim's stomach dropped. He knew that voice. One of his own ministers, a man who had stood beside him the day before, sharing coffee, speaking of reforms, smiling in his face while plotting his downfall. "Do you know who they are?" he asked, his voice tight. "No, uncle," the boy replied. "But I traced the signal. I tracked the frequency back to where it came from. I've been working with radios since I was 7. My father was a soldier. He died when I was small. I live on the street now, but radios are my world." Ibrahim could barely process what he was hearing. He had stepped out of the palace to see the truth with his own eyes. "No,